Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the soft, rhythmic patter of the rainy season in Edo, Japan. You're wearing thin wooden Geta sandals that clack against wet stones, and the air smells like drenched pine, damp earth, and the faint tang of smoke from someone's hearth. Rain beads off your paper umbrella in fat drops, and you're already wondering if it's soaked through. Around you, the narrow alleyways of Edo glisten like ink-brushed silk, and the people shuffle by in silence, each sheltered beneath domed, oil paper parasols that bloom like mushrooms across the landscape. You're trudging through it all, and yeah, your feet are definitely getting trench rot. You probably won't survive this with dry socks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's build a sleepy little map together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're heading down a canal-side street, and it's barely mid-morning, but already the rain has that relentless rhythm. Not a downpour, just enough to soak you slowly until everything's heavy and cold and smells like damp straw. A cart trundles past, pulled by a grumbling merchant whose wares are carefully wrapped in wax cloth. You pass a fish seller trying to cover his trays with makeshift awnings, bamboo poles, and more oiled paper that flutters and drips. His voice is hoarse as he shouts for customers who are staying home today. The fish are starting to look how you feel. You duck beneath a Norin curtain and step into a tiny sake shop. Inside, it's dim, warm, and it smells like cedar. The owner glances up from behind the counter where he's wiping down already dry bowls. He's been bored since sunrise. You buy a small flask, tuck it into your sleeve, and step back out under the downpour. Raindrops splash across the wooden threshold, and for a second, the warm inside world and the damp outside world seem like different dimensions entirely. As you walk on, you see others trudging along the slippery streets. A woman with 2 children clutches their sleeves tightly, pulling them along the edge of the gutter. One child carries a basket, the other a tiny umbrella that's clearly no match for the elements. Their sleeves are soaked, their shoes squish. But there's a certain order to this chaos, like everyone knows this is just part of life. You don't complain. You just keep moving. Carefully. The streets are slick with rain, but not deserted. A line of samurai in simple travel garb passes you by, their sandals splashing in practiced rhythm. They're probably headed toward the shogunate's office, where someone still has to write reports, yes, even on days like this. Historians still argue whether the Tokugawa bureaucracy had formal protocols for inclement weather, but judging by those guys' blank expressions, you'd guess not. You step aside as a palanquin hurries by, curtains drawn tight. The bearers wear straw capes that shed water like a thatched roof, but they still grimace with every slippery step. Must be a minor noble, no armed escort, but still too fancy to walk. You try not to imagine how stuffy it must be inside that lacquered box, all humidity and perfume and bouncing knees. And then there's you, average townsperson with a dripping sleeve, squinting up at a gray sky like it owes you an explanation. You duck into a covered walkway by a shrine and sigh. The bamboo gutters above you gurgle and overflow, spilling down in great arcs. You step carefully over a growing puddle near the base of a lantern stone. It's peaceful, though almost hypnotic. In fact, it's the sound that'll stick with you. The layered textures of rain, on wood, on stone, on water. It lulls you, slows you down, stretches time. You glance toward a garden path behind the shrine. The koi are hiding, smart little survivors. A cat crouches under the eaves, eyes narrowed, tail flicking with mild indignation at the heavens. The priest's nowhere in sight, probably curled up somewhere with a scroll and a warm cup of tea. Smart man. Not everyone minds this season. The rain means fewer fires. After all, Edo's buildings are tinderboxes in the dry months. So in a way, this endless drizzle is a gift. An inconvenient, foot-soaking, kimono-staining gift from the weather gods. Still, not all gifts are welcome. You take one last deep breath before pushing back into the wet again. This is just the start of the season. You'll need thicker sandals, better umbrellas, maybe a second robe to rotate while the first one dries. You make a mental list as you walk, because in Edo, surviving the rainy season isn't about fighting it. It's about adapting, enduring, and sometimes, laughing through the squelch. You turn the corner and the world tightens. Narrow alleys snake between rows of shops, the eaves of each building jutting out like 1,000 lowered eyebrows trying to shield the walkways. It doesn't really work. The rain still finds you. bouncing off roof tiles and sluicing into the gutters like a school of slippery fish. You keep your umbrella low and angled, half listening to the rhythmic splash of your own footsteps. Ahead, two merchants are in a mild shouting match, which in Edo just means slightly raised voices and the occasional theatrical sigh. One's selling silk, delicate bolts stacked high inside his wooden stall, each one loosely tied with hemp string and desperately covered by what looks like last year's failed umbrella collection. The other sells paper fans, a curious choice in this climate, and he's clearly unhappy about the foot traffic all diverting into the silk guy's better-covered shelter. You pause and pretend to study some overpriced fan painted with plum blossoms while the silk merchant continues adjusting his rain flaps like a ship captain in a paper storm. Inside the shop, the air is dense with the smell of damp cloth and camphor. You step just far enough in to shake off your sleeves. The merchant gives you a nod, half bow, and you return it, pretending to admire a roll of green-patterned silk you can't afford. Truth is, these stalls are more than shops, they're sanctuaries. Places to hide from the relentless drizzle and maybe sneak a sip of sake or a bite of pickled plum from your sleeve pocket while no one's watching. But time moves differently when it's wet. You linger longer than you meant to. Outside, the rain changes pitch, softer now, mistier, like it's taken a breath. The shopkeeper leans over and lights a small oil lamp. Just one. Not because it's dark yet, but because the gloom presses in, and a little fire makes you feel like you're winning. You wander back out eventually. The paper umbrella, miraculously still intact, greets the rain like an old rival. It's midday, technically, but you wouldn't know it from the cloud-blanketed sky. Street vendors keep shouting about fresh soba noodles and roasted chestnuts, but the energy is lower now, like the whole city's on half power. Still, someone's beating a drum slowly in the distance, probably a tofu vendor announcing their arrival with soggy fanfare. You pass a stall where a woman is selling small bags of charcoal, tightly wrapped against the moisture. She's older, wrapped in layers, face nearly disappearing beneath the wide brim of a straw casa hat. She hums softly, like the rain has tuned her. She offers you a charcoal brick for a few mon, and you take one, mostly out of sympathy, but hey, your tiny brazier at home will thank you later. Now, something peculiar, a child runs past you holding what appears to be a sheet of oil paper over a small wicker cage. You squint. Inside is a cricket. In the rainy season? Odd. But then you remember, wealthier families sometimes bought crickets even during summer rains, not just in autumn, because their song was considered comforting. Nostalgic, even. Historians still argue whether this practice was actually widespread or just a quirk of the literate elite, but here you are, watching a little boy race through a storm cradling a bug like it's a family heirloom. As you move along, you notice some stalls have simply surrendered. Blanketed in canvas and tied down tight, they look like slumbering beasts waiting out the storm. One has a small wooden sign hanging crookedly, closed due to sogginess. That's it. No apology. Just a fact of life. You snore quietly. You like that one. You stop under a makeshift awning where two men are trying to waterproof their wares with a mix of rice paste and camellia oil. One of them looks up and says, with perfect deadpan, that his customers always prefer the pre-wet look. You chuckle politely, then watch as he smears the oil with surprising finesse over folded bundles of hand towels. They gleam faintly, like lacquered cloth. There's an art to everything here. Even getting rained on. And in a way, it's all a kind of slow dance. Everyone's moving just a little differently, steps more cautious, gestures more deliberate. Like the rain has taught them to be gentle with the world. You spot a group of couriers crouched beneath an overhang, each wearing a straw cape that makes them look like a huddle of damp porcupines. They chew on rice balls and nod silently to each other. Not quite conversation, just shared existence. A dog trots past, soaked and indifferent, tail low but wagging with quiet persistence. You don't know where it's going, but it's clearly been out here all morning. A survivor. You salute it in your head. You arrive at a square where a few desperate souls are still trying to peddle wares. One's selling tiny paper boats, which seems almost cruel in this weather, but a few children are giggling as their boats float down the edge of the gutter, racing each other toward a clump of wet leaves. You watch a particularly determined girl shout go, and release her tiny craft into the current. It wobbles, spins, and then glides ahead like it knows where it's going. You cheer under your breath. Sometimes, the smallest victories feel like the biggest. And so the day drips on. The sky presses low, the rain doesn't stop, But somehow, neither do you. You're soaked, yes, but not defeated. The people around you, from silk peddlers to soggy schoolchildren, have turned the rainy season into a slow, deliberate ballet of adaptation. Not glamorous, not clean, but strangely beautiful. Like a painting that only makes sense when it's blurred. You finally give in and head toward the place everyone eventually ends up when the rain refuses to quit, the local sento. The bathhouse. It's tucked down a quieter street, just far enough from the market noise that the only sound you hear now is the pattering of rain on the wooden shingles overhead. The Norrin curtain flaps lazily at the entrance, too damp to rustle properly, like even it is tired of the weather. You duck inside and the warmth hits you immediately. Not just heat, but the thick, herbal steam that wraps around you like a damp blanket fresh from the fire. You remove your shoes, exchange a few coins with the attendant, and step onto the smooth floorboards barefoot, your damp soles leading faint prints behind you. Everything smells of pine, soap, and human effort. Inside, the atmosphere is a soft murmur of clinks and splashes. Dozens of townspeople have the same idea as you, soak the cold out of their bones and maybe catch up on some gossip. You settle onto one of the small wooden stools and begin scrubbing yourself with a cloth that's already seen better days. No one speaks loudly. Voices are kept just above whisper level, like secrets passed between water droplets. The man beside you is ranting softly about how his umbrella collapsed right as he passed a Daikin's office and how he's now convinced the officials laughed at him behind the shutters. You smile but say nothing. Everyone's got a rain story. As you rinse off, the water cascading over your shoulders sends a shiver down your spine, not from cold, but from the contrast. Outside, the world was clammy, spiteful. In here, it's like being wrapped in a bowl of miso soup. You slip into the bath. It's hotter than expected. The kind of hot that makes you hiss through your teeth but refuse to get out. The other bathers, men of all stripes, laborers, artisans, and old ex-samurai you think you've seen lecturing cats, are all sunk to their shoulders in the mineral-rich water. A few have rolled towels on their heads like steaming buns. One man is actually snoring, mouth half open, his chin just above the waterline. You don't blame him. The rainy season brings people here more often than usual. It's not just about warmth, it's about shared discomfort, and how to make that discomfort communal, even comforting. Someone nearby mentions how bathhouses started becoming more common during the Edo period because of increased urban population density. Cleanliness was no longer a luxury, it was a survival tactic. Especially when mold and stagnant rainwater could mean a month of coughs and worse. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of sento in Edo Japan was more driven by Buddhist influence or public health necessity. Probably both. Either way, you're thankful. Your muscles are slowly unclenching. Your toes are wrinkled like pickled plums. It's perfect. Across the room, two young boys are playing some kind of splash-less-splash game, trying to make waves without being scolded. An older man tells them to quit it without even opening his eyes. They freeze mid-motion, then dissolve into giggles. It's hard to stay mad when the rain's been wearing everyone down all day. You eventually step out, the air hitting your wet skin like a mild betrayal. You towel off, pat your hair into some vague sense of dignity, and wrap yourself in a fresh robe. You sit for a while in the side room where others are drinking barley tea and letting the sweat dry. A vendor has set up a small basket of snacks, rice crackers, salted plums, dried squid. You buy one of each and munch quietly while someone tells a long-winded story about a neighbor who caught a tanuki stealing dried mushrooms last week. You pretend to be interested, but your mind is drifting, softening, relaxing. Near the corner, a shoji window is cracked open just slightly. Outside, you can hear the rain still falling. Softer now. Almost like it knows you've escaped and it's sulking. The drops hit the wooden railing in uneven rhythm, and every so often, a gust of wind stirs the edge of the curtain beside you. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the contrast between heat and cool air lull you into a semi-trance. Some say bathhouses were the great equalizer of Edo society. Here, rich and poor sat shoulder to shoulder, their social rankings washed off with the dirt. Of course, not everyone agreed. There were class-specific baths, and noble families often had private ones. Still, for most people, this was as close to equality as life allowed. Naked and steaming together, no one looked especially powerful. You stay a bit longer than planned. You always do. Eventually, you stand, stretch slowly, and prepare to head back into the world of wet sleeves and cold feet. You step outside and the rain greets you again like an overly familiar relative. Still here, still damp, still going strong. But now, you're different. You're warm from the inside out. Your skin glows faintly with steam. You don't rush. You just move. The bathhouse has done its job. You can face the rain again. And maybe even smile while doing it. Back home, or at least back to wherever you're staying during this soggy season, you peel off your outer layer and hang it on a wooden rack that's already hosting a small convention of other dripping garments. Everything smells a little like mildew, and you just accept it now. That's the perfume of the rainy months. Even the furniture looks tired, with slightly warped, mats damp-edged, sliding doors reluctant to slide. You step onto the tatami carefully, toes squishing just slightly. It's a subtle betrayal. The rice straw core isn't meant for humidity, and it groans with each shift in weather. You light a small lantern and set your umbrella to dry, which mostly means you lean it up and pray it won't mold overnight. There's nothing to do outside now, which means you're left with the full and dangerous weight of indoor chores. And unlike fighting bandits or sailing with pirates, glamorous, cinematic things you never actually do, this is the true daily grind of history. You start with the futon. It's damp again, of course. So you roll it up, carry it to the veranda, and let the rain mock you while you air it out under the overhang. The air is so wet it might as well be soup. You do it anyway. It's tradition. Futons must air, even if they just get wetter. You head back inside, boil water for tea, again. The kettle sighs on the hearth like it's just as tired of this season as you are. And once you pour the first round into a ceramic cup, you cradle it for warmth more than thirst. Outside, a crow cackles. You suspect it's laughing at you. Now comes the favorite Edo pastime of many, folding. Clothes, sheets, towels, wrappers, anything within reach. Part therapy, part necessity. You sit on the floor, knees tucked under you, and begin. The cotton robe in your hands has a history. It belonged to your father, or maybe just someone before you. You're not sure anymore, but it smells faintly like cedar and old soap. There's a rhythm to this folding. Crease, smooth, stack. Crease, smooth, stack. As your hands move, your mind wanders. Did anyone in the shogunate ever fold their own clothes? Probably not. But someone folded for them. Someone, in some damp little room like this, making neat stacks of authority. Outside, the sound of the rain changes. It's heavier now. Fat drops bouncing off roof tiles like someone is scattering beans on a drum. You sigh, shift your weight, and start on the bedding. It's not just folding. It's rearranging, flipping, sniffing, yes, sniffing. A humid futon can turn on you like a wild dog if ignored. You give it the side eye, just to be sure. You think about all the houses in Edo, all the families doing the same thing right now. It's a collective domestic dance, one part survival, one part ritual. It's easy to forget that a city of 1 million people once operated with no electricity, no dryers, no synthetics. Just people, wood, paper, cloth, and patience. You step over to the window and open it just a crack. The air that slips in is cool and perfumed with wet leaves. Somewhere, a neighbor is boiling miso soup. Somewhere else, someone's rice has begun to scorch. You listen to the soft chaos of living. You feel like part of it. A quiet node in a network of survival. You pull out a cloth to wipe down the walls. Yes, the walls. Paper-covered sliding doors don't clean themselves. Moisture seeps in, warping the wood and blurring the lines of the painted cranes and plum blossoms. So you dab gently with a soft rag, pretending this matters, knowing it kind of does. Historians still argue whether these kinds of domestic chores were gender-specific or shared duties. Most agree women bore the brunt, but exceptions always existed, like you, right now, elbow-deep in door maintenance. Eventually, you sit back down and pour another cup of tea. You've earned it. Maybe you light a bit of incense, just to shift the smell in the room from old towel to philosopher's laundry. The smoke curls upward like it's trying to escape this wet dimension entirely. Your hands idle over your lap. Nothing more to fold. The room is quieter now. The rain has softened into background texture. A rhythm to lull you if you're not careful. You consider dozing off right there on the floor. But you remember the story about your neighbor. He once napped midday during rainy season and woke up with a rat on his chest. Not today. You stand, stretch, and check the laundry you hung under the eaves. Still wet? Of course it is. You press your palm to one piece and feel the cold sting of disappointment. Then you laugh quietly. What else did you expect? The rainy season has its own rules, and you were merely an actor in its soggy script. So you retreat back inside, dry your hands, and pick up a cloth-bound book of poems. Old ones. Rain poems. You flip through them lazily, the brushstrokes curling like vines across the page. One haiku catches your eye. Rain on my sandals. Even the dog refuses to leave the garden. You chuckle softly. You get it. Whoever wrote that knew exactly what this felt like. There's comfort in that, somehow. Across centuries, soaked and tired, someone else folded bedding in silence and waited for the sun. Later that evening, when the walls are still weeping and the sky shows no sign of mercy, the neighbors come calling. Not with umbrellas, but with bundles of snacks, sake, and one battered shamisen. You are planning for company, your hair's a mess, your floor's still faintly spongy, but rainy season in Edo has its own logic. When the outside world turns to mud, the inside world gets more crowded, and sometimes, a little poetic. You move the low table to the center of the room, clear away a basket of drying slippers, and make room for everyone. It's cozy, borderline cramped, but no one complains. In fact, there's something comforting about the closeness. You can smell the sesame oil on your neighbor's robe, and the paper-wrapped pickles she brought are already making your mouth water. You light a few more lanterns, the flicker adding a kind of theatrical warmth to the otherwise gray-tinted evening. The shamisen player, a wiry man with a voice like sandpaper, starts plucking a lazy tune. Not a formal performance. More like a memory someone turned into music. And then, it begins. The poetry game. Everyone knew this was coming. In the rainy season, with the streets turning to moats, the people of Edo turned inward. And inward often meant poetic. Tonight's theme? Rain, obviously. But also frogs. And moss. And those strange feelings you get when everything's damp and nothing fits right. You watch as the first neighbor leans in, lips already twitching. He composes a quick senryu, witty, slightly sarcastic, and delivers it like a punchline. Tea's run out again. Rain mocks me through my ceiling. And my socks have drowned. Everyone chuckles. You sip your sake, warm and a little sour, and try to think of a better one. Pressure mounts. Your turn. You go with something subtle, something that feels true. Moss on the doorstep. Every time I step outside, the world grows softer. A quiet nod ripples through the room. Respect. That's a solid rainy night poem. Someone passes you a dried plum. You've earned it. This is what people did, poetry gatherings, even among the not-so-literary. Contrary to the idea that poetry was reserved for scholars and samurai, common folks across Edo participated in these quiet, fleeting competitions. Especially during the rainy season, when farmers couldn't farm and merchants saw fewer customers. It was therapy. Art. Mildly competitive communal bonding. Historians still argue whether these poetry parties were true fixtures of lower-class life or exaggerated by later romantic accounts. But from where you're sitting, wedged between a noodle vendor and a firewood hauler, it feels undeniably real. Another woman chimes in with a more solemn tone. He left in the rain. I told myself it was fine. Then cried in the bath. Oof. That one earned silence. Not all poems are funny. Some are wounds wrapped in 575. You bow your head slightly. She accepts it with grace. As the night goes on, the sake loosens tongues. Someone tells a story about a frog that took up residence in their shoes last week. Another swears they saw a snake climb into their water bucket. A debate begins about whether the rain attracts ghosts, or if it just makes people more willing to believe in them. One neighbor, soft-spoken, eyes like wet ink, mentions that the local shrine keeper says rain isn't just water, it's the sky washing away our lies. That earns a thoughtful silence and a few long sips of sake. You notice that even the children, huddled in a corner with sesame crackers and whisper games, are trying their hand at haiku. One proudly recites, "Wet dog shakes again. Why do I sit so near him? Regret smells like fish." Applause. Well earned. Future poet of Edo, right there. And then comes the final round. Everyone must compose a poem about something inside the room. A sandal. A rice bowl. That one guest who's dozing off mid-sip. You scribble yours quietly and recite it when the shamisen pauses. Steamed window hides us. The world outside fades away. We are warm. We stay. That gets a sigh of approval from half the group, and a toast from the other half. For a moment, you forget the damp walls, the musty corners, the puddles underfoot. You're wrapped in language, laughter, and the softest kind of togetherness. Eventually, the guests trickle out. Not all at once. In pairs, or with hushed goodbyes and shared umbrellas. You walk a few to the edge of the alley with a paper lantern. The rain has softened to a thin mist, more whisper than fall. The kind that kisses your cheeks and makes you forget you're getting wet. Back inside, you tidy slowly. The sake cups are still warm. A single poem has been left behind on a scrap of mulberry paper. You read it aloud to the empty room. In this soggy world, the heart still finds dry places to stretch into bloom. You fold it carefully and tuck it beside your pillow. Maybe tomorrow, the sun will come out. Or maybe not. But either way, you've made it through another rainy night, not alone, not silent, not dry, but something better. Sometime deep in the night, you're jolted awake by a sensation you know far too well now, the call of nature. You try to ignore it. Try to pretend the discomfort is just a lingering dream about rivers or waterfalls or oversized teacups. But it's real. And in the rainy season, it's always worse. You light a single candle, its flame flickering like it already regrets being awake. The paper walls creak with moisture. You wrap yourself in your thinnest robe and slide open the door, revealing the dark world beyond your room. The corridor smells like old wood, wet paper, and something else. You decide not to investigate. The latrine is outside, technically. Not far, just a few steps across the covered walkway. But rainwater has crept into places it doesn't belong. You step carefully. The floor is slick, the sandals cold and uninviting. Each creak of the wood feels like a groan of shared suffering. Out there in the near darkness, you find the chamber pot you left beneath the eaves. A practical choice. During rainy season, outdoor latrines often flood, turning a basic human need into a voyage of soggy regret. Chamber pots, or yakin, become household heroes, if not exactly dinner table conversation. They're not elegant, but they're efficient. And you learn, quickly, how to balance dignity with urgency. You handle your business as swiftly and quietly as possible. You try not to think about the sheer volume of rainwater sloshing somewhere nearby, or the rumors of night soil men who sometimes slip and fall right into the muck. Legends? Maybe. But the city's sanitation system wasn't exactly waterproof. Historians still argue whether Edo's night soil collectors had the most dangerous or most lucrative jobs in the city. They were often paid well for their work, but let's be honest, you'd have to be. Slippery ladders, foul smells, and a near-constant risk of disease. Still, without them, the city would have been a swamp of far more than rain. You finish your late-night expedition and tiptoe back inside, trying not to wake the ghosts that definitely live in the hallway. You imagine one peeking around a corner, whispering, "You forgot to wash your hands." You chuckle nervously and light a stick of incense in self-defense. Back on your mat, you curl under the quilt, feet cold but dry. You listen to the rain again. It's steadier now. No wind. Just a sheet of sound draping the world like a lullaby for insomniacs. In the morning, or what passes for morning in this gray season, you wake to the same familiar drip drip drip. The courtyard puddle has expanded into a full-blown pond, and the neighbor's cat is eyeing it like it might contain fish. You pad across the floor and peek outside. That's when you see it, the floating latrine platform. A makeshift wooden slab tied with rope, bobbing lazily in the back alley canal. Someone's idea of plumbing innovation. Whether it's in use or abandoned, you can't quite tell. You close the shoji a little more firmly. Out of sight, out of stench. You remember hearing how some poorer parts of Edo resorted to floating latrines during heavy rain spells. Not out of convenience, but necessity. The ground simply couldn't handle it. And so, nature found its course. You shiver, not just from the image, but from how normal this sort of thing became during rainy season. Inside, you heat water for tea again, this time with extra ginger. The scent warms you from the nose down. You nibble on a piece of sweetened chestnut and try to think dry thoughts. Outside, a neighbor is bailing out a water basin with a ladle the size of a rice bowl. Futile, but meditative. Another is attempting to hang out their bedding for the third time this week. You wave in solidarity. They wave back, sleeve clinging to their arm like seaweed. You sit by the window for a while and scribble down thoughts in a little notebook. It's damp, warped, and already smudged beyond repair. Ink in the rainy season is a gamble. Sometimes, it glides. Sometimes, it bleeds like a dramatic actor exiting the stage. You use it anyway. Something about making marks, even when they don't last, feels important. And that's when you notice it, the faint smell of sewage. Not sharp, not overwhelming, but definitely present. You close your notebook and get up, checking corners, looking for leaks. Nothing inside seems amiss. You sigh. It's just the air again. The city exhales differently when it's drenched. You distract yourself with chores. Again. You wipe surfaces that don't need wiping. You fold things that are already folded. But the smell lingers faintly, like a warning or a reminder. Rainy season doesn't just bring inconvenience. It brings consequences. Overflow, mildew, rot. You remember a story an old neighbor once told, about a man whose entire back wall collapsed one night during a rainstorm. Not because of wind or lightning, but because the wood had simply given up. Too damp. Too tired. You walk over and knock lightly on your own walls. Just to check. They knock back, sort of. Creaky, but still upright. Eventually, you settle near the window again, tea in hand, candle flickering. The rain's pace has quickened, louder now, tapping insistently on the tile roof. But inside, you're dry. Warmish. Awake, at least. And you tell yourself, not for the first time, that tomorrow will be clearer. It probably won't. But in Edo's rainy season, hope is a kind of umbrella too. There's something oddly soothing about watching a grown man weave a basket with the focus of a calligrapher. You sit cross-legged under a shallow eave, sipping lukewarm tea from a chipped cup, while across from you, an aging fisherman loops soaked reeds through his fingers like he's tying the rain itself into submission. The rivers are too wild to fish today, have been for days, so this is what he does now. And it's not just him. All along the neighborhood, idle hands are weaving. The rainy season doesn't just halt trade, it suspends entire livelihoods. The rivers swell, fish scatter, and wooden boats become little more than floating bathtubs waiting for accidents. So, the fishermen adapt. They pick up the old crafts. The ones passed down, barely taught, mostly remembered. Basketry. Net mending. Rope tightening. Fixing things that might have never needed fixing but are suddenly the only things left to fix. You shuffle closer and watch his hands. Thick knuckles, calloused palms, fingers as blunt as tree roots. Yet the pattern he's weaving is delicate. Almost floral. He nods at you, doesn't stop working, just says, "Rain teaches patience." You nod back. Not because you fully agree, but because disagreeing with a man holding a sharpened reed feels impolite. The basket takes shape quickly, surprisingly elegant for something meant to hold fish or onions or laundry. You mention this, and he grins, 3 teeth, all proud. Wife says I should sell them, he shrugs. But people only buy baskets when it's dry. No one wants to carry anything through the rain. He pauses, then adds, except regrets. Plenty of people dragging those around lately. You both laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's true and also slightly poetic. Rain does that, turns observations into miniature philosophies. You half expect the sky to applaud. Historians still argue whether these rain crafts were common or simply romanticized in later stories, but there's enough evidence in preserved journals and surviving baskets to suggest that yes, on wet days, hands still worked even when boats didn't float. Elsewhere, you pass another idle fisherman whittling small toys for his daughter, an otter, a cat, maybe a mythological fox with extra tails if you squint. The detail is astounding. He claims it's nothing, just something to keep his fingers from rusting. You want to believe him, but the fox's grin seems far too clever for idle hands. A few women down the lane have set up a tarp shelter where they're darning socks and gossiping. The smell of pickled daikon wafts from somewhere nearby. One woman is spinning thread with such precision you swear her fingers never touch the spindle. Another is sketching patterns onto fabric with a bit of charred wood. Future embroidery, maybe. Or just rainy day doodles. A child joins them and starts playing with a ball of string, winding it around her fingers until she gets stuck and calls for help. The others laugh and free her gently, like it's a ritual they've performed dozens of times. And maybe they have. You stop beside a man carving a new handle for a ladle. His tools are modest, but the wood shines under the knife like it knows it's being reborn. He explains how the rainy season is the best time to shape certain types of bamboo. The moisture makes it pliable. It listens better, he says. You ask if that's true or just a poetic excuse to carve spoons. He winks and says both. It strikes you, suddenly, how the rainy season doesn't really stop life. It just changes its rhythm. Speeds some things up, slows others down. Things still get made. Ideas still get shared. Hands don't sit still unless they're sore or sleeping. It's not about productivity in the modern sense. It's more like stewardship. You take care of what you have. You mend, patch, reinforce. Not because you're bored, but because everything you own is a little too precious to toss out. You wander back home with a borrowed basket under your arm. Yours for now, the old man said, until the river's calm and the fish return. The basket creaks slightly as it shifts against your hip. Not in protest. More like a purr. It's happy to be used. Back inside, you set it down and admire its shape. Imperfect, yes. A little warped from being woven by candlelight. But solid. Trustworthy. Like a friend you didn't know you needed until they appeared in a thunderstorm holding spare socks. You light another stick of incense, this one scented faintly with pine. The smell mixes with the rain outside, and for a moment, you feel almost timeless. Like this scene, this room, this day, could have existed 100 years ago, or maybe yesterday in another life. You jot down a note in your warped little journal. Today I carried a basket made of yesterday's waiting. You close the book, press your hand against its damp cover, and listen. Not just to the rain, but to the quiet confidence of a city that knows how to sit still and still get things done. Rain drumming like distant hooves on the rooftops again, and your legs have given up negotiating with the outdoors. So, naturally, your wandering leads you where many Edo citizens eventually find themselves on a soggy afternoon, the Kabuki Theater. You arrive just as a wave of umbrellas bobbing like jellyfish in the sea press through the ticket gate. A young boy tries to sell you a soggy handbill featuring today's play, something about a betrayed samurai, a cursed teacup, and probably someone falling dramatically to their knees. You buy it, not to read it, but because your hands feel empty without paper in them, and besides, it's part of the ritual. Inside the theater, the air is heavy, warm with breath, damp with the humidity of 200 wet people slowly steaming. You find your place near the back, on the cheapest tier. There's a trickle of rain seeping through a crack in the roof, but someone has cleverly propped an extra fan on a stick to redirect it. Ingenious, if a bit optimistic. The stage is already lit, soft candlelight reflected in polished brass, giving every actor a kind of halo. And then it begins. The actor playing the hero storms in, robes swirling, his voice a dramatic thunderclap over the murmur of the audience. He stomps, pauses, spins, shouts. Somewhere, a woman faints in poetic agony. You're not sure if that's part of the plot or just a strong reaction to the overacting. Either way, you're riveted. Kabuki wasn't just entertainment, it was social theater, political satire, sometimes even rebellion in disguise. Historians still argue whether the shogunate secretly encouraged Kabuki to distract the populace, or whether they merely tolerated it because banning it outright caused more chaos. Either way, during the rainy season, Kabuki thrived. Because what else could you do but sit in a smoky hall and get emotionally wrecked by men in makeup pretending to be women yelling about destiny? The crowd responds to every cue like they've rehearsed it. Gasps in unison. Laughter in the same breath. At one point, a dramatic pause is punctuated by someone's stomach growling from the tier above you. Perfect timing. Applause erupts, not for the actor, but for the invisible belly. A vendor snakes through the audience selling skewered rice cakes and hot roasted chestnuts. You buy some. The warm salt on your tongue mixes strangely with the overly emotional monologue about a stolen letter. You don't care. It's glorious. Then comes the transformation scene, the quick costume change behind a fan, the flash of colored cloth, the raised eyebrow that signals plot twist. You feel the entire audience inhale sharply, like they all forgot oxygen existed. This is what they came for. Even the rain outside seems to pause. And when it starts again, heavier this time, someone behind you whispers, "Perfect weather for betrayal." You don't know them. You don't turn around. But you nod. Because yes, it is. You glance around during intermission. People chat in hushed voices, eating, stretching, comparing tear-streaked faces. The man beside you wipes his eyes with a sleeve and mutters, "I knew he'd die." Still hurts. You offer him a chestnut. He accepts. Kabuki actors train for years, sometimes under secret names. They could rise to near celebrity status, drawing crowds even in a downpour like this. You remember hearing how some fans would come for every performance of a favorite actor, memorizing lines, and critiquing the nuance in every shoulder twitch. Devotion like that doesn't need dry feet. You think about the actor on stage now. He's hurling a fan to the ground and accusing the heavens of cruelty. His face is contorted with the kind of anguish most people save for real loss. But he performs it nightly. You wonder if he cries when it actually rains, or if he's already used up his entire reservoir of tears on stage. Another round of applause, and you glance again at the audience. You realize the theater isn't just shelter from the storm. It's a kind of mirror. People come here to watch lives unravel on stage so they can keep their own stitched together. It's therapy with better costumes. The final act ends not with a bang, but with a slow exit. A figure limping away down a misty road painted onto a wooden backdrop. The lighting flickers. The audience leans forward. And then, silence. Perfect, still silence. The curtain drops. Someone sneezes. Someone else says, "Again tomorrow?" And just like that, the spell breaks. You file out with the others, stepping carefully across the slick wooden floors. The night air is thick again, rain sliding from the eaves in silver streams. But inside your chest, there's a flicker of something warm. Like maybe your own sorrows are a little lighter now that they've been echoed in a louder voice. You walk home slowly, rice cake still in your hand, theater ticket pressed flat in your sleeve. The rain no longer bothers you. It's just part of the performance now. The streets are your stage. And you, my damp friend, are the quiet understudy of every silent drama written in puddles and sighs. By the next morning, the city smells like it's been pickled. Not just damp, not just muddy, but saturated down to its bones. You slide open your window to the gray world and see children already out, barefoot and shrieking, chasing snails with thin sticks and reckless enthusiasm. Their feet slap through puddles like little carp escaping nets, and their voices pierce the drizzle with a kind of joy only the perpetually damp can understand. You wrap yourself in a robe that might have been dry yesterday, maybe, and head outside, lantern in hand just in case the clouds decide to dim the day even further. You watch the snail chasing from the safety of your doorway. One child, the smallest, is cupping something in her hands like a priceless jewel. Another is already assembling a lineup of snails on a wooden plank, like contestants in some slow-motion parade. The rainy season, for all its miseries, is absolute paradise for snails. They're everywhere, on fences, climbing rice paper walls, hiding under sandals, clinging to bamboo poles. You once found one inside your tea bowl. A traumatic moment. You now inspect all ceramics with the thoroughness of a customs officer. You walk further down the street where more children are gathering. Their mission, collect as many snails as possible before breakfast. Points for variety. Extra points for big ones. Double points if they're still moving. It's oddly wholesome. You hear one boy shout, "Mine's got stripes," while another cradles a snail like it's a newborn heir. One elder woman leans from her porch and shakes her head at the chaos, but even she cracks a smile. She remembers, probably, what it was like to hunt snails before school. Before work. Before adulthood told you snails were pests and not tiny, portable miracles. Historians still argue whether this kind of play was encouraged or just tolerated. Some sources say it was part of seasonal education, children learning about the natural world, cycles of rain and growth. Others claim it was simply what happened when kids had free time and too much mud. You suspect the truth is somewhere in between. You crouch to get a better look at a particularly determined snail, currently scaling a stone like it's Mount Fuji. Its slow determination is both inspiring and deeply relatable. A girl with ink-stained sleeves offers to let you hold it. You hesitate. Then accept. It's heavier than you expect. Cold. Smooth. A little snotty. You nod respectfully to the snail. He's having a day too. Some of the kids begin constructing little obstacle courses, twigs, leaves, a paper fan tunnel. One sets up a tiny dish of water as a snail spa. Another starts humming a song to his mollusk, claiming it climbs faster when serenaded. You don't believe him, but the snail does seem to wiggle with more confidence. Soon a kind of competition forms. Who has the biggest? The prettiest shell? The most adventurous climber? Someone mentions the legendary emperor snail from last year, supposedly the size of a fist and able to write poetry with its slime trail. This leads to vigorous debate and one poorly drawn diagram on a wet plank. You linger longer than you mean to, watching them, laughing quietly, remembering something you never really lived, but feel like you did. Eventually, a few mothers call their children back for rice porridge. One girl carries her entire lineup of snails on a flat leaf like a parade float. Another deposits hers at the base of a tree with a formal bow. You do the same. Farewell, tiny traveler. May your journey be squishy and safe. As the kids retreat, the street quiets again. The puddles ripple under a sudden gust. Somewhere, a frog croaks in protest, and you wonder briefly what kind of kingdom this weather creates, where snails are celebrities, frogs are oracles, and humans just observers with wet sleeves and too many thoughts. You head back home, hands chilly but heart a little warmer. Inside, you light a small candle and jot down a line in your notebook. Children chase snails. Even the slowest creatures have somewhere to be. You smile to yourself. Maybe tomorrow you'll write more. Or maybe not. But for now, you let the rain patter its applause on your roof, as if even the sky agrees this moment mattered. Somewhere between mid-afternoon and not quite evening, when the rain shifts from heavy curtain to intermittent drizzle, you find yourself fiddling with a lantern that doesn't want to live anymore. It's an old one, washi paper stretched across a bamboo frame, paint faded, edges fraying from too many damp nights. You set it on the floor near your futon, next to a spool of thread, a needle, and a very ambitious sense of confidence that today, maybe, you'll actually fix it. You sigh. The tear across one side looks like a scar from some small battle it lost long ago. Probably to a sharp elbow or an overeager cat. Still, it deserves better than retirement. So you begin the slow work of patching it up. While your hands move, the candle beside you flickers with a nervous kind of energy. You're aware of the silence in the house. It's not unpleasant, just thick. Outside, the rain whispers instead of shouts, and from somewhere across the street, the long, trembling note of a bamboo flute drifts through the mist. You pause in your stitching. Because of course, it's time for ghost stories. Rainy season has a reputation in Edo, not just for mold and misfortune, but for the way it turns shadows into something almost alive. There's a reason why people gather around candles during this time, telling tales of drowned spirits, jealous wives with long hair and longer grudges, and the occasional umbrella that walks by itself. You've heard the stories before. Everyone has. And yet, when someone starts one, usually around the time the sky turns purple and the tatami starts to creak from damp, you listen like it's new. Historians still argue whether Edo's fascination with yurei, ghosts, was rooted in actual belief or just an excuse for drama and artistic expression. After all, kabuki theater was filled with haunting women in white robes. Ukiyo-e prints featured wide-eyed spirits gliding through fog like they misplaced their feet centuries ago. But here, alone with a half-mended lantern and the sound of dripping eaves, belief starts to feel like something less about truth and more about mood. You light a second candle, not because you need more light, but because you don't want shadows getting ideas. You tuck the repaired edge of the lantern gently around its bamboo skeleton and press it flat, smoothing it with a brush dipped in rice paste. And then, from just beyond the screen wall, you hear footsteps. Bare. Slow. A dragging sound. A cough. You freeze, brush hovering in midair. Then a soft knock. Rhythmic. Not forceful. Not friendly. You stand, step lightly across the room, and slide open the screen door, and there stands your neighbor, holding a bowl of candied yams. "Oh," she says, "you're pale. Did I scare you?" You exhale all at once. "Yes," you say, "you look like a spirit of sugar and root vegetables." She laughs, steps inside, and sits without being asked, as if summoned by the scent of candle wax and loneliness. Which, honestly, she probably was. The two of you sit in easy silence for a while. She picks at the corner of the yam bowl. You pass her a cup of tea. And then she says, "You ever see one?" You don't have to ask what she means. You shake your head. "I did once," she says. "In the bathhouse mirror. But maybe it was just steam. Or my old face catching up to me." You both laugh again. But there's a moment after when neither of you speak. When you remember how reflective surfaces do odd things when it rains. When silence stretches too long. When candles flicker even when there's no breeze. Eventually, she tells you a ghost story, not one you've heard before. About a girl who refused to leave her umbrella after death. She haunts rainy alleys, offering it to passersby, and if they take it, they wake up soaked in a pond with no memory of how they got there. You thank her and promise to never borrow a stranger's umbrella again. She leaves after a while, vanishing into the damp alley with her empty bowl and a shrug. You relight the candle she extinguished by accident. The flame returns slowly, like it had second thoughts. The lantern is nearly finished. You trim a bit of the paper, tie off the frame, and gently rotate it to admire your work. It's uneven, a little puckered, but still beautiful, still functional. A small defiance against the soggy world outside. You hang it by the door and watch the soft yellow glow leak through the repaired paper. It throws shapes on the walls, no ghosts, just gentle flickers. You nod to it, like you might a loyal dog. You sit back down and write a line in your journal. In the rainy dark, the lantern and I agree to keep each other. And you do. Until the next downpour, or the next knock at the door, or the next time the shadows get too comfortable. You wake to the faint scent of mildew and an even fainter sense of dread. Today, you're visiting someone with real problems. Not ghosts. Not leaky lanterns. Something more insidious. Damp silk. You arrive at the house of a noblewoman just after midday, your sleeves rolled, your umbrella half collapsed, your patience in short supply. She greets you from a distance, perched delicately on the wooden veranda like she hasn't moved in days. And honestly, she might not have. Her expression says everything, equal parts tragedy, boredom, and silent panic. She gestures to the laundry area with one finely lacquered hand, as though pointing at a battlefield. Inside, chaos. Racks of expensive kimono hang like wounded birds. Their colors have dulled. The hems are sagging. One, horrifyingly, has the beginning signs of mold, tiny, almost artistic blooms of discoloration that spread like rumors in a palace. You bow deeply. Not out of reverence, but out of respect for the sheer amount of work you now have to do. Everything smells like wet ink, she sighs. Even the tea towels. You nod. The rainy season has no mercy, not even for the elite. In fact, it may be crueler to them, because the more beautiful your fabrics, the more miserable they become in humidity. The noblewoman's prized kimono, dyed with safflower and indigo and embroidered with silver thread, are particularly vulnerable. They were meant for moonlit poetry readings and quiet envy, not for clinging to skin like damp rice paper. You begin your inspection. One by one, you lift sleeves, test hems, whisper apologies to fabrics older than your grandparents. She watches you like a hawk watches a mouse. You feel judged by a wardrobe. As you work, she tells you how she's written letters to cloth merchants, requesting special cedar sachets and camellia oil treatments. They say they'll arrive next week, she frowns. But by then I may be a moss sculpture. You don't respond. Not because you're being rude, but because you've just found a disaster in progress. Her most prized ucha cake has grown a small, circular bloom of white fuzz behind the collar. You nod solemnly, then carefully begin the cleaning ritual, a cloth barely damp with sake, a soft horsehair brush, a whispered prayer to whatever spirit governs luxury textiles. Historians still argue whether noblewomen in Edo were truly hands-off with their own garments, or if they secretly helped servants care for them behind closed doors. The records are fuzzy, pun intended. But standing here, watching a woman pace like a general while you sponge her robe with religious intensity, you suspect the truth is more about performance. She's involved, just not directly. Her anxiety is the thread binding it all. She offers you tea as you work. It's floral, elegant, and somehow warmer than you expected from someone who once scolded a maid for folding fans incorrectly. As the steam rises from your cup, she asks if mildew has a soul. You tell her it does, and it's probably a bitter, damp little gremlin who hates sunlight and enjoys making silk cry. She almost smiles. You finish what you can. The robes that can be saved are laid carefully in a sunnier corner of the veranda, though sunlight, today, is only theoretical. The ones beyond saving are wrapped and sealed with camphor and hope. You bow, she bows slightly deeper, and you part ways with the weight of wet silk still clinging to your memory. On your way home, you think about the lives of the upper class during this season. We tend to imagine noblewomen lounging in dry rooms, writing poems and sipping tea while the lower classes trudge through puddles. But no one escapes the rain. In fact, the more delicate your world, the more it betrays you when the sky turns sour. Back at your own place, you find your clothesline sagging under the weight of 2 damp robes and a towel that smells like defeat. You laugh quietly, not because it's funny, but because it's ridiculous how deeply relatable the noblewoman's problems have become. You light incense, not the good kind, just enough to cover the smell of moist everything, and sit near the open window. A breeze filters in, heavy with petrichor and distant complaint. You take up your journal again and write. Silk does not forgive. Rain does not remember us. We just hang and hope. Outside, the sky threatens another downpour. You reach up and check your own robe, still clinging to the bamboo pole like it's too afraid to fall. You whisper, "We'll get through this," mostly for yourself. Then you make another pot of tea. Because in the rainy season, even small victories, like a robe that doesn't smell like mushrooms, deserve celebration. The next day begins, as most do during the rainy season, with you peeling yourself off the futon like old parchment from a wet scroll. You blink at the ceiling, listen to the steady drip from the eaves outside, and wonder if today will be dry enough to leave the house without smelling like a pond by lunchtime. Spoiler, it won't be. You shuffle outside to fetch some breakfast, maybe grilled rice balls or a few leftover chestnuts, but before you make it 5 paces, you stop short. There, on the stone steps of the small neighborhood shrine, lies a cat. Not a wandering alley cat or some bedraggled street fluffball, but the cat. The temple cat. A dignified old fellow with one ear turned permanently sideways, thick white fur now smudged faintly with soot, and a glare so refined it might have once been used to judge haiku contests. You bow slightly. It feels appropriate. He doesn't move. Just watches. As if to say, "Well, what are you doing here without an offering?" You reach into your sleeve and pull out the smallest piece of grilled mackerel left from last night. He accepts it without enthusiasm, then flicks his tail and turns his back on you, like a priest concluding the shortest sermon in history. You make your way up the steps and enter the shrine. It's small, quiet, and smells of damp incense and old cedar. The priest is nowhere to be seen, probably inside writing fortunes or desperately trying to dry his ceremonial robes. But the donation box is there, and so is the little rack of charms for sale, each wrapped carefully in waterproof cloth and tagged with promises. Good health, dry weather, fewer leaks. You drop in a few coins and pick out a charm with a tiny frog embroidered in gold thread. It's labeled for safe travel in slippery times. You're not sure if that means rainy roads or emotional decisions, but either way, you tuck it into your belt. At the back of the shrine, you kneel and offer a silent, somewhat sarcastic prayer to the weather spirits. Nothing elaborate, just a humble request for one day without mildew and the return of laundry that actually dries. Behind you, the cat purrs faintly. You choose to take that as divine approval. Cat shrines, Nikko Jinja, weren't unheard of in Edo Japan. While most were dedicated to more conventional deities, some smaller neighborhood temples had their own furry mascots who were believed to bring luck, protection from rodents, and surprisingly, fair weather. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were taken seriously or just part of local charm, but either way, people left offerings. Dried fish. Knotted toys. Sometimes even tiny haiku written on rice paper, addressed to the cat god of this block. You remember one such haiku that someone recited during a rainy poetry night. Tail sways with thunder. Does the cat call down the storm? Or chase it away? Outside, the rain starts again, gentle at first, like a hesitant apology. You step back into your sandals and give the cat one last nod. He doesn't return it, of course. Too important. Too busy guarding the city's moisture levels with his supernatural whiskers. Back on the street, others pass by the shrine and bow slightly toward the cat without stopping. It's routine now. Like feeding koi or dodging puddles. There's something oddly stabilizing about it. A ritual that says, yes, the world is wet and inconvenient, but at least the cat is still judging us. You carry on, now with a charm in your belt and a faint fish smell on your hands. Vendors are just beginning to set up under dripping awnings. One has tied bamboo screens together to create a mobile roof. Another, more optimistic, is setting out rice crackers on a plank propped up by 2 buckets. You admire their courage. You stop at a stand selling seasonal charms, amulets embroidered with weather-resistant thread, packets of fragrant herbs said to repel mold, and tiny carved foxes that claim to guard against thunder spirits. You buy a small turtle-shaped bell because it makes a satisfying chime and because the vendor says turtles are immune to bad luck during rainy season. No evidence to back that up. Still, you tie it to your belt next to the frog charm and feel incrementally more powerful. You return home to find the cat from the shrine sitting just outside your door. Uninvited, of course. You step over him with due respect, unlock your door, and prepare tea. The cat remains, tail twitching. You pour a bit of warm water into a dish, place it outside, and the cat ignores it entirely. Naturally. You suspect he didn't come for hydration, he came to supervise. You sip your tea, watch the water dribble off the roof, and write another note in your journal. Temple cat returns. Blessing or quiet warning? Still, the rain falls soft. Maybe the cat knows something you don't. Maybe he's just wet and lazy. Either way, his presence makes you feel strangely lucky. Or at least, noticed. And in a season where the sky seems to forget your name daily, that's enough. It happens just as your stomach starts complaining again, an unmistakable hiss of hot oil meeting mochi batter. Somewhere close, someone is frying something delicious, and you don't even need to see it to know that rainy season has finally gifted you a perfect street food moment. You grab your umbrella and step out into the drizzle, following your nose with the kind of focused determination usually reserved for wild dogs and desperate poets. The scent leads you to a small mobile food stall wedged under a crooked canopy of patched canvas and repurposed umbrella ribs. It leans a little to the left, as if weary from years of surviving puddles and tax collectors. Inside stands a vendor, short, broad-shouldered, with forearms like cured tree trunks. His sleeves are rolled, his hair tied back, and his focus is absolute. A shallow brazier spits steam and smoke as he turns skewers of grilled mochi, their edges caramelizing into golden crunch. Beside him, a row of carefully layered fried tofu pockets glisten under a coating of sweet soy sauce. Heaven smells like this. You step up, nod, and he greets you with the universal Edo phrase for "I know it's raining and I'm still out here cooking, so let's just not talk about it." You pay your coin and he hands you a skewer of mochi, still hissing, still slightly threatening to burn your mouth, and you bite anyway. Rainy season food hits different. Maybe it's the way everything tastes warmer, richer, more earned. Maybe it's the contrast, the sweet, smoky crunch against the cold slap of mist on your neck. Whatever it is, you suddenly feel like life makes sense again, if only in 3 chews per bite intervals. The vendor keeps his setup mobile. Wheels on one side, an adjustable bamboo canopy on the other, ropes tied to every corner in case of wind. There's even a folding panel he can angle downward to shield the fire when gusts get serious. You watch him adjust it mid-grill, like a master balancing 5 layers of logistics and 3 layers of sauce. Historians still argue whether Edo's street food culture really flourished in all seasons or if rainy months put a significant dent in daily sales. But looking around now, seeing the steady trickle of damp customers crowding under this makeshift roof, it's hard to believe these stalls ever stopped. Another vendor sets up nearby, this one selling sweet potato cakes. She's older, wrapped in layers of faded floral print, and she's wearing a straw cape so weathered it looks like it once served as a boat. She nods at you, gestures to a pile of neatly wrapped confections, and shouts, 3 for 1 if your feet are wet. You glance down. Your toes are basically soup. Deal accepted. You buy her cakes, wrap them in a cloth napkin, and find a half-dry crate to perch on beside the mochi grill. Around you, more people cluster, kids with hands outstretched, an old man with a bamboo flute tucked into his sash, a mother bouncing a fussy baby while expertly eating tofu with chopsticks. The rain ticks against the canopy, but no one flinches. In fact, someone starts humming. It's a simple tune, maybe a rice planting song or something from a distant fishing village, but the rhythm matches the rain. Soft, steady, intimate. You unwrap one of the potato cakes and share a corner with a stray dog that somehow found shelter beneath the grill vendor's stool. It wags once, then stares at you like it owns the stall. You hand over the rest of the cake. There are more important things than pride. You watch the vendor pack up his supplies with smooth precision. Every cloth gets folded, every skewer counted. He doesn't rush. He doesn't dawdle. He simply moves like someone who has made peace with being soggy for the next few hours of his life. Before he wheels away, he hands you a leftover rice cracker, warm and a little greasy, and says, "For the next puddle you survive." You bow. He bows lower. Then he disappears into the haze, stall creaking behind him like a ship pulling away from shore. You return home with a belly half full and a heart somehow completely warmed. There's something deeply comforting about knowing someone stood over a brazier just to feed strangers while rain tried to chase everyone inside. Back in your room, you hang your soaked robe, tuck the leftover cake into a ceramic jar, and scratch another note into your journal. Rain tastes like mochi. Sweet, burnt, impossible to eat without smiling. You lie back and let the smell of grilled rice and soy sauce linger in your clothes, your hair, your walls. There's a lot you could complain about. But right now, you don't. Because that bite of mochi? That was better than sunshine. You don't mean to snoop. You really don't. But when you pass by the magistrate's office and see a cluster of officials fanning out damp scrolls with all the desperation of bakers trying to rescue burnt bread, you pause. Just for a second. Maybe two. A clerk mutters something about unreadable clauses while another attempts to pin the corners of a sopping wet document beneath ceramic teacups. You watch one poor soul squinting at a page so blurred that it could just as easily be a poem, a weather report, or a confession to tax fraud. You should keep walking. But you don't. Because watching Edo's bureaucrats wrestle with ruined paperwork is, frankly, more entertaining than half the kabuki plays you've seen. The magistrate himself finally steps outside, robes tucked up slightly to avoid the mud, and barks, "Why wasn't it in the archive box?" A pale clerk stammers something about a leaking ceiling. Another tries to explain that the box itself was soggy. You take a single step backward and pretend to admire a nearby gutter. You're not technically eavesdropping. You're participating in local government. As a concerned, very damp citizen. The truth is, ink and rain have never gotten along. The beautiful brushwork of official records, letters, and ledgers becomes a nightmare during the rainy season. The very materials that made Edo culture flourish, mulberry paper, charcoal ink, water-soluble pigment, are also its greatest enemies when the sky decides to throw a tantrum. You once heard a paper merchant describe it like this: "We build our world in clouds and wonder why it floats away." Historians still argue whether the Tokugawa administration had formal rainy day procedures for record storage. Some claim they implemented wax wrapping, layered boxes, and cedar-lined shelves. Others suggest it was mostly wishful thinking and the occasional half-hearted prayer to a paper-loving spirit. You round the corner to the back of the magistrate's building and find a heap of scrolls drying under a woven mat canopy, balanced precariously on bamboo stilts. A few apprentices are frantically blotting pages with rice paper while fanning others with the desperation of overworked birds. You suppress a laugh. One apprentice, barely more than a boy, mutters, "I think this one used to be a tax record, or maybe a marriage license." He holds up a parchment now speckled with holes, edges curling like old toast. Another apprentice sighs and says, "Maybe if we rewrite it from memory?" To which the first replies, "Didn't we find someone 5 mon for illegal eel trading last week, or was it 8 mon for shouting at a goose?" You can't help yourself. "Definitely the goose," you say. They look up, startled, but one nods in agreement. "Yeah, that goose was very offended." Eventually, they offer you a seat under their makeshift canopy. Someone hands you a cup of barley tea brewed in a tin pot sitting atop a gently smoking firebrick. You sip it while listening to their stories of bureaucratic rain-related blunders. One tells how last year's census in this ward had to be redone because half the scrolls were used by a scribe as emergency sandals. Another claims a high-ranking official once signed off on a flood damage assessment that turned out to be a love poem, smudged, mistaken, and entirely approved. You learn that during the worst downpours, many officials resorted to oral record-keeping until things dried out. Entire days' worth of legal transactions and declarations memorized and re-reported. Apparently, it led to some creative reinterpretations, like a land dispute that became a wedding proposal, or a fish theft accusation that somehow morphed into a tax exemption. You sit there for a while, sipping tea, watching as they carefully lay out documents and whisper guesses at smeared names. It's not efficient. It's not elegant. But there's something deeply human about the whole thing. The way they laugh about it. The way they treat every page like a fragile little secret. The way, despite everything, they still try to make sense of it all. Eventually, the tea cools. The apprentices return to their blotting and you excuse yourself with a small bow. As you walk away, the youngest one waves and says, "Tell the goose we're sorry." You promise you will. Back at home, you open your own bundle of notes and scrolls. They're safe, for now, tucked inside an old lacquered box lined with dried cedar chips and stubborn optimism. You pull out a page that's begun to fade and trace the characters with your fingertip. It's not much, but it's yours. You add a line at the bottom. The rain does not read, but it edits freely, soft. Smudged revisions fall. You close the scroll, rewrap it carefully, and place it back inside. Then you sit quietly, candlelight flickering, the rain still tapping like an impatient editor outside your door. You'd think the sound of rain might soothe you to sleep. And on some nights, maybe it does. But tonight, something's off. The rhythm is too loud, too fast. Like the sky is tapping a frantic message on your roof that only mosquitoes can read. You light a coil of mosquito repellent, those spiraled incense sticks that look like a pastry designed to ruin your evening. The smoke curls upward, delicate and fragrant, but the effect feels purely symbolic. A moment later, the high-pitched whine of a mosquito buzzes past your ear. Then another. Then 5 more. You slap the air with your sleeve and miss every time. There are few things more humbling than being outwitted by a creature smaller than a grain of rice. Rainy season, as it turns out, is mosquito paradise. The puddles. The buckets left uncovered. The corners of the street were water pools and never quite evaporates. Even the cleanest homes become breeding grounds for tiny airborne saboteurs. You light another coil, just in case. Your room now smells like cedar in quiet defeat. Across the alley, you see your neighbor performing a similar dance, swatting, cursing under her breath, fanning the air with a cooking pot lid. You raise your hands in solidarity. She returns the gesture, then smacks her arm and mutters something unprintable. It's not just discomfort, it's a matter of health. Edo's rainy season brought with it waves of pest-borne illnesses. Fevers that came and went without warning. Historians still argue whether these were early outbreaks of dengue, malaria, or something else entirely. Records are murky, symptoms poetic, and diagnoses inconsistent. All you know is that every itch tonight feels like the prelude to a plague. You duck under your mosquito net, a precious luxury made from fine netting woven by hand and likely patched a dozen times, and lie down. It offers the illusion of safety, but you've long since stopped trusting it completely. One mosquito always gets through. It always does. And it always goes for your left ankle. Why? No one knows. Scholars remain baffled. You lie there, listening. Outside, monks chant in the distance, the low hum of their voices weaving through the rain like a lullaby from another life. You try to focus on that. Not the buzzing. Not the scratching. Not the fact that you are a buffet in linen sheets. You try to count the chants. 1, 2, 3. B-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z-Z. Slap. Miss. You sit up and begin the nightly ritual of searching for the intruder. The candle flickers. Your eyes strain. You think you see movement on the paper screen wall, but no, just a shadow. You rotate slowly like a paranoid statue. Then, movement. You strike. Victory. You inspect your hand. No visible remains. Maybe a phantom. Maybe you're imagining things now. Maybe the mosquitoes have ascended beyond physical form. You drink a sip of lukewarm barley tea from the cup beside your bed. It tastes bitter. Everything tastes bitter at this hour. Then you remember the monk down the lane. He has a trick, or so he claims, a chant that keeps mosquitoes away. You once overheard it. Oh, flying blood thief, find peace in the temple bell. Bother not my ear. You chuckled at the time. But tonight, you whisper it. Just in case. In the morning, you wake groggy, vaguely itchy, and mildly victorious. Only 2 bites. A new record. You step outside and find the monk sweeping puddles from his temple entrance. You nod to him. The chant worked. He grins. Of course it did. Or maybe the rain worked harder. Either way, the streets are swimming again. A boy nearby is emptying a pot of standing water with a ladle, grumbling about the mosquito army barracks behind his house. A few others are poking sticks into a ditch to see what's living in it. You hope it's just frogs. You tell yourself it's just frogs. A vendor passes, selling cloth bags filled with dried mugwort, said to repel insects and evil thoughts. You buy one and tie it near your bed that evening. The smell is sharp and earthy, and you kind of like it. Maybe you'll start hanging one year-round. That night, you write in your journal by lantern light. The bite comes silent. Not teeth, but tiny firebrands. Born from puddled skies. You lie down, coil smoking, net secure, mugwort in place. And this time, you almost believe you'll sleep through the night. You don't plan on getting involved in any drama. Really, you don't. You're just trying to walk home with a bundle of radishes when suddenly a shout slices through the rain. Thief! You freeze. The people around you freeze. Even the rain pauses for dramatic effect. Then comes the splashing, fast, frantic footsteps echoing off the slick stones of the alley. A figure barrels past you, soaked, wild-eyed, clutching something under his arm. A constable follows close behind, sandals slapping, uniform robe flying out behind him like a wrinkled kite. You flatten yourself against the wall as they rush past, your radishes nearly sacrificed to the cause. Then, just like that, they're gone. The chase fades into the distance, swallowed by a puddle-slick maze of alleys. You exhale slowly and look around. A few others are doing the same, adjusting umbrellas, shaking their heads. One woman mutters, "Rain makes fools of everyone." And it does. Especially thieves. The rainy season is when crimes get slippery. Literally. Roads turn to rivers, footsteps vanish, and the pounding of rain on rooftops makes for the perfect cover. Pickpockets love a good storm, umbrellas mean limited vision, wet sleeves mean clumsy fingers, and crowded awnings mean perfect opportunity. Even the constables struggle. You once watched a man try to arrest someone while slipping 3 times in a row. It was like a comedy routine, except no one laughed until the criminal took pity on him and helped him up. Historians still argue whether crime rates truly increase during rainy months or if the season just made people more alert, more paranoid. Some scrolls list a spike in acts of disorder under rain and dusk. Others blame the weather for making tempers short and pickpocket hands long. Back at the corner, a group has begun discussing the chase in earnest. An old man insists he saw the thief take dried eel from a vendor stall. A woman says it was a sealed letter. Another swears it was a small wooden statue of the thunder god. You chime in, could have been all 3. A buffet of bad decisions. There are chuckles. A young constable appears, soaked to the knees, and bows apologetically. He got away, he says. Slipped into the drainage path behind the mill. Someone offers him a rice ball. Someone else suggests he try bamboo sandals next time instead of the usual leather ones. Less stylish, more grippy. He accepts the advice with grace. And the rice ball with more enthusiasm. You offer him one of your radishes. It's not much, but it's crispy and reassuring. He thanks you and mutters, "Sometimes I think the rain's smarter than me." It is. You wander off, careful with your steps. Even innocent people end up flat on their backs during rainy season if they forget that cobblestones were clearly designed by slippery-hearted pranksters. As you turn into your own street, you spot a group of children pretending to be constables and thieves. One wraps a towel around his head and shouts, "Stop, criminal!" Another runs away squealing, only to slip and land directly into a puddle. Laughter erupts. Justice, served with a splash. You stop and watch for a moment. The rules are clear, capture the thief before he reaches the shrine steps. But the thief is fast, the constable is barefoot, and the shrine steps are slick with moss. Spoiler, nobody wins. Everybody falls. And yet, they get up laughing, clothes muddy, eyes bright. You reach home and shake off your robe before stepping inside. A few drops fall onto the floor. You dry them quickly. You don't need mildew on top of everything else. You set down your radishes and think about the thief. Was he desperate? Reckless? Just hungry? The rain covers a lot, sins, slips, secrets. Maybe he's sitting somewhere now, clutching a soggy eel, wondering if it was worth it. Maybe it was. You light a small lamp and open your journal. He ran like the rain. No plan, just puddles and speed. What was he escaping? Outside, the storm has quieted to a soft drizzle. You lie back, staring at the ceiling. In Edo, even crime gets poetic if the weather's bad enough. You never thought you'd spend an afternoon sipping lukewarm barley tea while monks argue about thunder. But here you are. The temple is quiet except for the low murmur of voices, the hiss of rain outside, and the occasional squeak of a wet sandal sliding ever so slightly on polished wood. You sit on a reed mat near the corner, pretending not to eavesdrop as 2 monks lean over a scroll between them, brows furrowed like children puzzling over a riddle they wrote themselves. Thunder is the voice of Raijin, the older one declares, tapping the scroll for emphasis. Every crackle is a reminder. Power. Discipline. Divine judgment. The younger monk, barely past 20 and already balding in protest, sips his tea and counters, or it's just trapped wind between mountain and sky. Nature has no temper. Only rhythms. You smile into your cup. You've heard this argument before. Variations of it echo through temples all over Edo every time lightning strikes too close or thunder shakes a window frame. The rainy season brings not just floods and puddles, it brings questions. Why do storms follow silence? Why does the sky growl like a dog with a grudge? And who, exactly, is in charge of all this noise? The conversation escalates as a third monk chimes in from behind a sliding door with a sleepy "what if it's just the sky sneezing," which is met with a scandalized gasp and the sound of someone dropping prayer beads. Thunder in Edo is not just weather, it's theology. Some believe it to be Raijin, the god of storms, drumming across the heavens with his circle of taiko drums. Others lean into Chinese cosmology, invoking elemental cycles and the shifting of qi. Still others roll their eyes and say, "We live in wooden houses under thatched roofs, of course it sounds louder." Historians still argue whether these spiritual interpretations influenced public policy or just provided comfort. After all, if thunder is divine, then floods are instruction. If thunder is just noise, well, then you're just wet and unlucky. The older monk continues his case with conviction. Raijin punishes those who disrespect the heavens. Did you hear about the shrine hit last week? Burnt through 3 roof beams. No one died, but the tea kettle was vaporized. A sign. The young monk rolls his eyes. That was lightning, not thunder. Different phenomena. Raijin would never vaporize a kettle. That's just rude. You slurp your tea loudly to hide your laugh. Both monks look at you. You bow slightly and offer a neutral comment. Maybe the tea was too strong. They nod, as if you've said something profound, and go back to bickering. A novice brings out a tray of rice cakes. They're misshapen, a little undercooked, but warm. Everyone accepts one without complaint. Rainy season baking is a gamble. Humidity makes the dough stubborn, the fire fickle, and the cook perpetually embarrassed. Still, there's comfort in imperfect food, especially when the sky sounds like it's having opinions again. A low rumble shakes the beams above your head. The young monk looks up, then at the older one. Still think that's punishment? Still think it's a sky sneeze? The older monk retorts. The novice adds, "I think it's just annoyed we're still talking." You step outside for some air. The temple courtyard is gleaming with rain. Lanterns reflect in the puddles like little moons. You walk slowly beneath the awnings, hands behind your back, listening to the soft drip from roof corners and the deep, intermittent growl of distant thunder. A dog barks once. A bell rings faintly from the next district. Life continues, even when the sky sounds like it's ready to fold in half. You pause at a small shrine tucked into the garden wall. It's dedicated to Inari, but someone has left a tiny paper fan and a dried persimmon at its base. A note nearby reads, "For the storm spirits. Please don't break our roof again." You smile. Maybe belief doesn't need to be organized. Maybe it just needs to be honest. Back inside, the monks are quieter now. Someone's reading aloud from a scroll, an old story about a farmer who fell in love with a thunder spirit disguised as a traveling merchant. It ends badly. Most things involving thunder spirits do. But the tale has its charm. You pour yourself one last cup of tea and scratch a note in your journal. The sky rumbles on. We assign it names and moods. It never replies. You pack up, bow, and step once more into the rain. It greets you with a gentle patter and a single, almost thoughtful rumble. The monks return to their silence. The storm, perhaps, is listening too. You're awakened, not by thunder, for once, but by a far less celestial sound, the clatter of something heavy sliding across a rooftop. It's close. Too close. You sit up, squinting toward the window, and then, clank, another tile skitters down the eaves and shatters just outside your door. You mutter something respectful yet exasperated and go to investigate. The rain has eased to a mist, but the damage has been done. The house next door, an old merchant's place with a roof that's been politely asking for repairs since last autumn, is finally giving up the ghost. A few more tiles dangle like crooked teeth, one already cracked in two, hanging on by the thinnest thread of roof mortar and regret. You sigh. You grab a hat. And you do what any halfway decent neighbor would do during rainy season in Edo. You go looking for a carpenter. Luckily, you don't have to go far. Down near the end of the block, a group of them are already at work, barefoot on the slick planks of a collapsing porch. Their tools are spread out on cloth mats, their hair tied back, their sleeves rolled. One holds a roofing tile like it insulted his mother. Another is already halfway up a ladder, grumbling about people who think thatched roofs are invincible. You bow and explain your neighbor's roof situation. The head carpenter, a short, serious man with shoulders like a wagon and eyebrows that could deflect arrows, nods solemnly and wipes rain from his forehead with a cloth that's long since lost the battle. "Well, come," he says. "Roofs wait for no one." And just like that, a procession of repairmen follows you back, like damp samurai summoned for a battle against gravity and mold. They inspect the damage in silence, poking, tapping, lifting the wobbly edge of a beam with professional detachment. One of them holds up a tile and lets the others nod. It's not judgment. It's understanding. Every roof in Edo eventually cracks a little under the rain. The trick is getting to it before it stops being a roof and starts being an accident. You make tea. They don't ask for it, but they drink it like it's wages. Repair begins swiftly. A rhythmic chorus of wooden mallets, rope creaks, and barked instructions fills the air. The old merchant whose roof is shedding its skin stands nervously to the side, muttering thanks, apologies, and vague promises to offer prayers at the shrine of Dekokuden if the roof holds through the next storm. You look around and realize something remarkable. The smell of wet timber and freshly shaved cedar curls through the air. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it's nostalgic, even though you're not sure for what. Something about new wood always feels like hope. Carpenters in Edo are no small deal. They're craftsmen, engineers, sometimes even first responders. When earthquakes hit or storms broke a beam in two, it was carpenters who arrived first, armed with saws, ropes, and impossible patience. Historians still argue whether their guilds held more political sway than they let on. Some say they work hand in hand with fire brigades. Others claim they had secret codes carved into beams to mark the date of construction and builder pride. You watch as one younger carpenter repositions a ridge tile and drives in a new wooden peg with just enough force to make your own teeth rattle. Another adjusts the gutter, which, up to this point, had been more theoretical than functional. The work is fast, efficient, and surprisingly quiet. They don't talk much. They just nod, pass tools, grunt when needed. Like birds building a nest during a hurricane, focused, undistracted, absolutely not interested in drama. At some point, your neighbor returns with a bamboo basket full of sweet bean cakes and bows low enough to make his joints click. The carpenters eat with quiet thanks, never stopping for long. Rain might return any moment. And then, as quickly as they came, they're done. A few pats on the roof. One final adjustment to a crooked beam. A satisfied grunt. Better than before, one of them says. You nod. So does the roof, probably. They gather their tools, sling soaked cloths over their shoulders, and head off toward the next storm-bitten home. You watch them go, a moving sculpture of calloused hands, wet feet, and quiet pride. Back inside, you jot something down. Rain will find the crack. Men with ropes and cedar will. Teach it to behave. Later that night, the roof holds firm. The wind picks up. The tiles stay quiet. You smile. And for the first time in weeks, you fall asleep without the fear of something crashing through the ceiling. By now, the rainy season has soaked into your bones, your bedding, and probably your personality. But even in this damp chapter of life, Edo knows how to keep spirits just barely above the floodline, with seasonal shops that sell solutions, distractions, and occasionally, outright lies. You spot one such place on your way back from the bathhouse. It wasn't there yesterday. Or maybe it was, hidden beneath a tarp or disguised as an unusually cheerful vegetable stand. Now, it's unmistakable, red lanterns swinging lazily in the drizzle, strings of paper charms dancing like fish on a line, and a bright signboard promising good health, good mood, no mildew. Tempting. Inside, it smells like dried plum, wet straw, and ambition. Shelves are crammed with everything the rainy soul might crave, charms for wellness, packets of herbs for foot-soak rituals, carved foxes to guard doorways, and bundles of paper talismans to hang above futons. Some promise to drive away insects. Others claim to invite auspicious breezes. One simply reads, "No more leaks, please." You buy that one immediately. The vendor is an older woman with perfect posture and the expression of someone who's seen too many skeptics walk out healthy. She gestures to a small table covered in polished stones and ceramic figures. "Protection," she says. "For the things you didn't know needed protecting." You pick up a ceramic umbrella, no bigger than your thumb. "What's this one do?" She squints. "Mostly decorative. But if you believe in it enough, it won't matter." She hands you a sachet of dried citrus peel, mugwort, and camphor. "Tie this here your pillow," she says. "Keeps away damp thoughts." You nod, deciding not to ask for a refund if it fails. Historians still argue whether these shops were born from traditional folk belief or savvy business acumen. Likely both. Edo's citizens were spiritual, yes, but they were also pragmatic. If a wooden frog could keep your walls dry and your mind sane, you bought the frog. If it didn't work, well, it still looked nice on the shelf. Back home, you start deploying your purchases like a general preparing for battle. The mildew charm goes above the door. The anti-mosquito sachet near the bedding. The ceramic umbrella finds a spot on the windowsill, watching the clouds like a tiny weather deity. You light the last of your good incense. It smells faintly of citrus and memory. Then you open the wrapped paper the vendor gave you free with purchase. Inside, a single line of calligraphy on mulberry parchment. Rain is not the enemy, only the excuse. You think about that for a while. Outside, children splash by in the street, holding makeshift parasols made from broken fans and washi paper. One has a bundle of charms tied to his sash, each one fluttering like a badge of damp honor. A group of neighbors passes, arms full of fresh-bought talismans and waterproof scrolls. One woman declares her home protected by 3 frogs, 2 gods, and 1 very tired husband. You hang your final charm above the brazier, next to the drying tea towels. It's shaped like a wind chime, but instead of ringing, it rattles quietly every time someone doubts it. You hope it stays silent. You sit down to a bowl of rice and pickled radish. Nothing fancy. But the smell is warm, the texture grounding. You chew slowly, watching the rain trace lazy lines down the window frame. Maybe it won't stop tomorrow. Maybe it will. Either way, you have frogs. You write in your journal. The charm doesn't work, but it gives the mold something. To feel nervous near. Before bed, you check every corner again. Not for leaks this time, but to admire your makeshift temple of superstitions and hopes. There's something comforting about believing in small defenses. They may not stop the storm, but they make you feel less alone in it. You wake to quiet. Not silence, the soft clank of a teacup next door, the flutter of a sparrow under the eaves, the whisper of something drying, but the absence of rain. Your ears are confused at first, tuned to days of dripping gutters and water-slapping stones. But no! It's really stopped. You rise slowly, careful not to break the spell, and slide open the window. Outside, the world glows. Not sunlit exactly. The sky is still the color of worn linen, but there's a new warmth pressing at its edges. Puddles mirror rooftops instead of swallowing them. Laundry has returned to its rightful place, outdoors, pinned with a kind of joyful vengeance. The city breathes like someone finally exhaling after holding it in for a week. You step out into the street and your sandals no longer squish. Neighbors nod with a different kind of energy today. One waves a bundle of damp rugs over his head in triumph. Another is already on the roof rearranging tiles that only half fell. A child skates down the street on a plank of wood, shouting no more umbrellas, until her mother catches up and insists she take one just in case. And she's right, because though the rain has stopped, the world is far from dry. You pass your favorite stone wall and notice a patch of moss now thick enough to deserve its own address. A cart creaks by, trailing steam from a kettle of Odin. Even the food smells sharper. Less boiled, more celebratory. And yet, as you walk further, you realize something. The smell hasn't left. That particular aroma of the rainy season, earthy, fermented, faintly floral in a way that says life has been damp and intends to stay that way. It clings to the wood, the cloth, the very air. Your robe, though aired, still whispers of mildew in wet pages. You pause in front of your home and smile at your own front step. The umbrella stand, the drip bowl, the line of charms and talismans all sagging slightly now, waterlogged but noble. They've done their job. Mostly. Inside, your floorboards creak differently. Less soggy, more thoughtful. You open the windows wide. A breeze enters, not strong, but determined. You light incense, again. Just habit now. Even if the mold is backing off, the ritual remains. You begin the last great task of rainy season, cleanup. The futon gets a full airing. The paper walls get wiped again, even if they already were. You wash your robe with herbs, trusting they'll pull out the ghost of dampness. You boil vinegar to chase the smell out of your bowls. It half works. And as the room begins to feel new again, you feel older somehow. Like you survived something subtle but deep. Historians still argue whether people in Edo celebrated the end of the rainy season with official rituals or if they simply noticed one day that their sandals were finally dry. Some say there were tea ceremonies marked by clear skies. Others insist the change was internal, less a party, more a pause. You sit on your veranda and eat a rice cracker that actually crunches. You close your eyes and listen, not to the rain, but to its absence. Then you write. The rain has moved on, but I still hear it, softly. In everything dry. You nod to yourself. Then to the house. Then to the ceramic frog still perched on your shelf, slightly damp but still standing. And with that, you take one last deep breath of moist wood, green tea, and fading thunder. The season hasn't gone, it's just stepping back. Retreating into the soil. Into the air. Into memory. You rise. You stretch. You close your notebook. And the city continues, squish by squish, into whatever comes next. The room dims as the day fades. The paper lantern hums faintly with the last breath of a candle's flame. You're stretched out now, belly warm, bones humming with quiet fatigue. Your robe feels lighter, your mind softer around the edges. Outside, the streets are still damp, but no longer brooding. You hear someone sweeping, someone boiling water. Somewhere, a dog sighs in its sleep. You roll onto your side and feel the tatami beneath your fingers, smooth and cool. You think about umbrellas drying, about tiny frogs hiding in buckets, about the soft way the air holds you when it isn't trying to drown you. Rain will come again. That's the truth of it. Seasons fold into each other like layers of cloth. But for now, for tonight, you've outlasted this one. You've folded the futon, wiped the mold, lit the incense, eaten the mochi, and whispered to every puddle not to come back tomorrow. You did well. So rest now. Let your eyes drift. Let your breathing slow with the hush of empty clouds. Let go of the damp corners of the day. You're home. You're dry. And the storm has passed. Sweet dreams.